Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Get Your Popcorn. I missed last week. It was the first week I have missed on the podcast, and I'm recording this morning, last minute and a day late, live from my bedroom before my kid gets up because I just didn't get my shit together. If you hear any background noise, it's my dogs because they're hanging out next to me. But yeah, that's why I look terrible this morning. Don't judge. Good thing the internet is never judgmental, and this won't be in the zeitgeist forever. So that's great. Where anyone I went to high school can access it. So awesome. We're going to pretend that I look better than I do. As a lot of you know, I've been competing. I've now done my 2 regional shows. I have nationals coming up in 2 days. I actually fly out tomorrow for nationals. I came in second and third, guys. So I'm pretty excited about that. But that's why I look like shit. Yeah. And then I was going to do the episode yesterday to record. And then I have to be honest, I'm a giant fan of garbage TV, despite my taste in movies. So I was watching Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and time got away from me. So I'm sorry. We will be back on track, especially once the shows stop. And my last one is this weekend, so it'll be a little bit easier for me because my currently working out. I do an hour and 15 of cardio every day and weights 5 days a week, plus at least 10,000 steps a day. My cardio is going to be obviously way, 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 way down. And then my step count will be the same. But I'm going to be, exercising roughly a fourth of what I do now. So I'm going to have more time. So today's going to be like kind of a quick episode. I did A Star is Born, the 2018 version. Despite my super full chest hate of remakes, I really do like this one. I have a big soft spot for Bradley Cooper, and this is his directorial debut. I think it's because I'm such a fan of Inside the Actors Studio, the TV show that was on forever. I don't know if any of you guys watched it, but like it was a big part of the things I watched, particularly when I was in high school and in theater and really like wanting to learn a lot about acting and the craft of acting. Bradley Cooper is a master's degree graduate of that program. You can actually see him on a lot of the episodes. He's very method. So I think after seeing him before he was famous on some of those episodes as like a student, when he did get famous, I was kind of like, I've always been sort of rooting for him. Because this has just been such an extended dream for such a long time. And I do think he's profoundly talented. So this is his version of the film. It's a remake. It's actually the third remake, but the fourth film in total. There's a 1937 version of this film produced by David O. Selznick, who was the producer behind Gone with the Wind. All of the films kind of have this like different interpretation, but similar narrative of a rising starlet and a falling star. And it usually culminates with addiction and alcoholism. We also have a 1954 remake directed by George Cukor, who interestingly enough directed the first little bit of Gone with the Wind. And this stars Judy Garland. This is my second favorite version of the film. And this one's a musical. We have the 1976 Frank Pearson directed film that stars Barbra Streisand and Chris Christopherson. This is also a musical. This is my least favorite version of the film. Sorry, Babs. I don't know. I don't think it's that good compared to the others. And then we have this version. This initially was started in development in the 90s and then was stuck in development hell for forever. If you want more on the backstory of this, I really recommend going, and I'll make sure I link them in my show notes and the references because I did use them a little bit for this. It's a podcast called What Went Wrong, and they really delve deep into the entire like pre-production and production of this. Obviously, I talk a little bit more about like plot and stuff, so mine's like very, very condensed. But they have like, I think it's an hour-long episode on this movie, and it's so good. I love that podcast. So it was stuck in development hell from the 90s. Initially, Will Smith was supposed to play the lead, which I think, I don't know. I like Will Smith, but I always have a hard time just not seeing Will Smith. Is it just me? I don't know. Like he's like, yes, he was good in King Richard and like, I don't know. He's good in The Pursuit of Happiness, I guess. I don't know. I just like, I don't think he could have carried this role, particularly not in like the 90s, 2000s era of Will Smith. I don't know. It's one of those movies for me that now that Bradley Cooper's been in the role, I just don't think it can be remade after this. Like he just like cemented a very iconic performance to me, at least. In the 2000s, it was then picked up by Jamie Foxx to produce with Oliver Stone directing, which I don't know. He would not have been the director for this. I think you would need more of a emotional director, if that makes sense. I don't know. I just don't see Oliver Stone doing a very good job of this. Initially, Aaliyah, the singer, and Paul Walker were attached to the lead, which, God, that would have been a bad movie. And Paul Walker, sorry to speak ill of the dead, but like, he's not a good actor. And Aaliyah, was she in anything before she died? I don't know. Very talented singer. Love Aaliyah. But I don't know if she could carry the weight of this film. Mariah Carey was attached to play the lead at one point, and Lauryn Hill. Mariah Carey was good and Precious, but I don't know what her, like, I don't know if she could carry a film. I don't think Glitter's too great. And then in 2011, Eastwood became attached to direct. This is when Clint Eastwood has, been back rising up as a director. And Beyonce was attached to play the lead. Was in her, like, acting era at the time. She was in Cadillac Records, where she played Etta James, which I thought she did a good job in. She was in Dreamgirls, obviously, which I will do at some point. I fucking love Dreamgirls. That is a great movie. It's so good. Yeah. Stars Eddie Murphy. I don't know if you've seen it, but Eddie Murphy gets a lot of hate. I fucking love Eddie Murphy. I think he's great. I think he's like the funniest person that's ever lived. And even bad movies like he's in. I like Haunted Mansion. It's a garbage film. I fucking love it because Eddie Murphy just wins my heart. Anyway, that has nothing to do with this film. We got there from Beyonce. Beyonce was attached. She dropped out because of her pregnancy. Christian Bale, Tom Cruise, and Johnny Depp were all in the works. I actually would have liked to see a Christian Bale Beyonce version of this film. I think that could have been great. Not as Clint Eastwood as a director. I think Beyonce as an actress that is like relatively inexperienced and I think would have needed extra support in the acting. Clint Eastwood would not have been the director for her. He's famously gives like very little feedback and takes like 2 takes. But I'm picturing like a Christian Bale Beyonce directed by Spielberg. Don't you think that'd be a good movie? I think it would be. And by 2015, Beyonce had dropped out due to her pregnancy. She was in talks again. And then Bradley Cooper was then attached to direct. Beyonce again dropped out, and then Adele was briefly considered before Lady Gaga was eventually cast. So our final casting is Bradley Cooper as Jackson Maine. He's our main guy. We've got Lady Gaga as Allie, his love interest. We've got Andrew Dice Clay as Allie's dad. This is when Dice Clay was in like a few like Oscar-worthy movies. It was weird. Yeah, he had like a little era where he would just happen to be like tiny little characters in these like great movies. It was odd. What a time. Dave Chappelle plays George or Noodles. Sam Elliott plays Bobby, who's Jackson's older brother. And then we have Rafi Gabron as Rez, who becomes Allie's manager. So filming began in 2018. What's interesting is all the concerts that they shoot, like all the festivals and stuff for Jackson and Allie's like performances were all shot at actual music festivals like Coachella and Stagecoach. And they actually used Willie Nelson's son's band as the backing band because he and Lady Gaga wrote a lot of the music together. So they inserted themselves at Stagecoach at Willie Nelson's sets, obviously with his permission. But yeah, it's all shot live and they could because it's a live. They were doing these in like one take. They're shooting them as though it's like a concert film, which you can kind of see a lot of it's done with handheld and stuff. But it's just like feels very real because it is. Like I really love that that's how they chose to do it. It gave me a lot of similarities to the way that the boxing scenes are shot in The Fighter, where it's actually shot by like the people that shoot boxing matches. It felt similarly where like you could really tell that this was like a one take, this was live, like this is what was happening. I really liked it. So at the time of the release, the film made $436 million on a $36 million budget. I myself went and saw this in theaters. I loved it. And then I recommended it to a number of people. Everybody I've ever shown this film to loves it, except for my husband, who hates this movie. Actually, here's the thing. My husband loved the first all the way to the last 20 minutes of this film. I did not warn my husband that this does not have a happy ending. And my Disney prince of a husband only likes happy ending films. I did not know this because we had just started dating. So at the end of the film, when it ends very tragically, spoilers, this came out in 2018, Jackson kills himself. My husband just like, he's like, what the fuck? And he's like, God, why would you make me watch this? So he did like it. It's a good movie. And that's why he reacted that way. So the reception of this film was fairly good. There was some like criticism, obviously, because it's like a 4th time remake. Here's what the New York Times said. Like many filmmakers, Mr. Cooper explains a little bit too much. It isn't enough that Jack drinks. Mr. Cooper wants us to know why, so he fleshes out Jack's past, turning it into melodrama, into therapy, and robbing the character of its mystery. And here's why I think that is. Bradley Cooper, as a student of the actor's studio, if a character doesn't have a backstory in the script, they will create one because every single moment for the character has to have purpose. For somebody who's trained that way, it has to make sense. It isn't just words on a page, it's a whole person. So it makes so much sense that you would see that in his direction style. I also don't consider it to be melodrama myself. I don't agree with that review, but I could see why somebody would. Peter Bradshaw from The Guardian says, to deliver a shock to the new, another one has to receive the shock of the old. A Star is Born turns that transaction into a love story. And then Brian Talsaro wrote for RogerEbert.com, who has passed away obviously before this film came out, but I still like his review site for my reviews when I read them. Gave it 3.5 stars, and this I agree with. Cynics may be tempted to rip apart A Star is Born, but there's just not there's cynics may be tempted to rip apart A Star is Born, but there's just too much that's been done right here for them to sound legit. A lot of ticket buyers go to the movies for the characters, people they can feel like they know and maybe even care about, and A Star is Born delivers two of the most memorable of the year. It's a film that believes in the power of song to connect with its listener in a way that it can change their lives, and it will be a beloved piece of work for those who believe in it too. And that's where I sit with this. Yes, you can criticize the plot is predictable. It sure is. It's the fourth time the movie's been made. It has the same similar arc, although they do change it. It's inspired by the same kind of storyline. But the performances are so good and they feel like real people. They really do. Particularly, like Lady Gaga's good in this movie. I don't think she's been good in any else that she's been in. I think this role was sort of tailored to her given the story of a rising pop star and blah blah blah. But Bradley Cooper is tremendous in this film. And I agree wholeheartedly with this particular review. Overall, most of it was quite positive, other than they, criticized it for being a bit sappy and stuff. It's a fucking love story, guys. Like sometimes we just need to understand this stuff is going to be genre specific. It's like when people criticize Tarantino movies for being too violent. You're like, yeah, you fucking went and saw a Tarantino movie, you fucking dummy. Anyway, I digress. This has a Rotten Tomato score of 90%. Obviously, Rotten Tomatoes is not super reliable because the scores can change over time, because often in retrospect with films, when we review it, we tend to like things more. So then the score gets altered a little bit. I don't remember what it was at the time of release. As always, the only awards I really give a fuck about are Academy. I was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Original Song, Best Sound Mixing. And it won Best Original Song for Shallow, which is the big song you heard everywhere in the radio at the time. And although Lady Gaga lost her Oscar for Best Actress, she won it for this. All right, let's get into the plot, guys. Wow, this is a speedy episode thus far. Just a warning on this, we are obviously going to talk about suicide and addiction. So if you don't want to discuss that in any sort of detail, this is maybe not the episode for you. Jackson, our main character, struggles pretty heavily with alcoholism, and you see him run himself into the ground. I might get a little teary during this. I have a lot of experience with people in my personal life with addiction. I've seen people really lose themselves in addiction, and so much so that I've had to remove myself from their lives based on a lot of the decisions they chose to make in their active addiction and are still struggling. It's a very complicated disease. It's a very complicated disease. And I think this is a film that highlights it really well, because you see this brilliant, smart person who continues to make this horrible choice and is slowly throwing his life under the bus despite all reason and logic. And I think it just is a good supporting argument that addiction is a disease and it is a way to cope with things and trauma. And that's how addiction starts. And drugs and alcohol are not usually the problem. They're kind of the solution for someone in terms of dealing with their trauma. Not a healthy solution, but often the one that people find when they have these maladaptive coping strategies. So I think shed a good light on addiction, in my opinion, because we see this character that we like and that they're rooting for, and they just can't get out of it for most of the film. It's beautiful. Obviously, we're going to deal with suicide at the end of it. I don't know if any of you have listened to my Stars Born episode. I don't know if any of you have listened to my It's a Wonderful Life episode. I had a friend a year and a half ago commit suicide, so I'm always going to get teary at the end. Yeah, it's a tough thing. I haven't watched this film since her death, so this was a really hard watch for me because of that. So, just a warning in advance if you're going to watch the film. So, our film opens up with the character of Jackson Maine. Jackson is in his 40s. He's this quite a big country star. His star is starting to fade a little bit, like he's on tour. He is playing a song called Black Eyes. I love this album. You guys got to listen to this album. It's amazing. The music is so good. Like, it is a musical technically, this film, but you don't feel it because it's just so woven and perfect. And I love a musical, I really do, but this isn't like Wicked. Like, it's woven entirely into where the songs should be performed. So it almost tricks you into thinking it's not a musical. So Jackson is this aging star. He's an alcoholic. He's a pill addict. It's very clear that he's being enabled by everyone in his team around him, including his brother Bobby, his manager slash main support system. We also cut to Allie. She's this young waitress. We see her dealing with her boss, who's an asshole. We see her on the phone. She's fighting and breaking up with a boyfriend, and just her life is very stressful. She's not where she wants to be. This is kind of cut in between. It's very fast cuts. After we see her yelling at her boyfriend and breaking up with him over the phone, she starts to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow and walks out. And that's where we see the title card of A Star is Born. This is obviously a nod to Judy Garland for the 1954 version of the film. And like I said, that's the second best one. So after Jackson's show, we see him we see him in the back of a taxi cab. We can see that he's already inebriated and has taken pills, but he wants to go to the bar because he needs another drink. And there's interesting foreshadowing I didn't notice till the second time I watched this film. But there's a point where they pull up to a stoplight, and in the background, you see rope hanging on a billboard. This is obviously foreshadowing to Jackson's eventual suicide. So the closest bar is a drag bar that he goes into, and this is where Allie is performing tonight. So she performs La Vie en Rose, which is the song that Bradley Cooper first saw Lady Gaga sing, and what he was so moved by that performance, that caused her to just cement into the role. And so this is why they chose to put that in. Like I said, Bradley Cooper is a member of the Actors Studio and a graduate of that. He's going to pull as much real life things to ground him in his character as possible. And I think La Vie en Rose is one of them. Drawing back to that first initial feeling he felt when he saw Gaga perform. And Jackson is moved to tears by her performance, and he decides he has to go backstage to meet her. He goes backstage, and she's very starstruck, and all the other drag queens back there are super starstruck because this is Jackson Maine. He's on tour. He's just performed a concert that night in their town. Like, this is a big deal. She's very nervous. He flirts with her quite a bit. He helps her take off her drag makeup, and there's this moment where he pulls off her eyebrow and then kind of runs his finger down her nose. Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga have electric chemistry in this film. Holy shit. So much so that there's a lot of rumors at the time going around that they were like having an affair. They've obviously both denied this, but I think it's kind of weird that her engagement broke up and his marriage broke up in and around the time of this film's press release. I think Lady Gaga was a little bit after, but still. Sus. So after they've been flirting, he wants to go and he wants to get a drink with her. So they go out to a bar and they kind of have one of those nights where you talk about everything together. So she's talking to him about how she writes songs but doesn't sing them. And then Jackson is then approached by somebody wanting a photo. And the guy's quite rude about it. And they get into an altercation, ultimately into Allie taking it upon herself to punch this guy in the face. And then they, of course, leave. They get some ice for Allie's hand, and they're sitting down on the sidewalk outside. And Jackson says, "Can I ask you a personal question? Do you write songs or anything?" And Allie says, "I don't sing my own songs." Jack says, "Why?" And she said, "I don't feel comfortable." Jack says, "Why don't you feel comfortable?" And Allie says, "Because, like, almost every single person I've come into contact with at the music industry has told me my nose is too big and that I won't make it." Jack says, "That your nose is too big." Allie says, "Yeah." Jack says, "Your nose is beautiful." And then she kind of does this, and he says, "Are you showing me your nose right now?" You don't have to show me. I've been looking at it all night. Ali says, come on, no, you're not. And Jack says, well, I'm thinking about your nose for a very long time. Ali says, you're full of shit. And Jack says, I'm not full of shit. And Ali says, yes, you are. Jack says, I'm telling the truth. And she said, yeah, you're full of shit. And so they're kind of talking back and forth. And then Ali starts to sing a little bit of one of the songs she's been working on, which is a tiny bit of the song Shallow. At the end of the night, Jack drops her off at her house where she lives with her father. And as she's walking in, there's kind of that famous sign where he says, hey, and she stops. She says, what? And he says, I just want to take another look at you. And she goes like this down her nose. So she goes in and he's invited her to go to the next show, but she says no because she's got this work obligation. She talks to her dad about it, and he kind of says, you know, sometimes in life you got to make these choices. Her dad's played by Dice Clay. So ultimately, Ali does decide to go to work and not to the show, but she has a confrontation with her boss and then just quits. And it's like, yeah, fuck this. And she goes to the show. So while watching backstage, Jackson calls Ali onto stage, and he wants her to sing the song, and she doesn't want to do it at all. So he starts to play her song, and then she just steps up to the mic and just belts her song Shallow, and they have this like iconic performance. And she becomes a sensation. She goes like internet viral. After the show, they go back to the hotel room to fool around and have sex, but Jack is too drunk and he passes out. So this is when his brother Bobby comes in, his manager, and he helps put him to bed. And Ali says like, oh, I think he's had too much. And Bobby says like, you have no idea, and basically gives Ali a warning, and, you know, says, you're really great tonight, but like, stay away from this guy. Like he's a drunk, like he's gonna pull you down. But does she listen? No. So she goes on tour with him and they fall in love as they go across the country. We see scenes of this. They decide that they're going to go to Arizona to Jack's childhood home that he had bought. They find out that Bobby has actually sold the land, and Jack flips out and attacks Bobby. They get into this huge fight, and Bobby reveals that, like, you know, like he had already told him that he had sold it. Jack knew everything, but he was too drunk to remember. And I don't believe this is in a take advantage away. I legitimately think that Bobby like sold it and then Jack forgot. So Bobby then yells at Jack for being a drunk, yells at him for wanting to keep the property, for idolizing their dad, who is super abusive, and yells at him and just says, like, all dad did was turn you into his drinking buddy. Like, we don't need to care about this anymore. And he quits being his manager and he quits the tour. So Ali starts to gain attention on the tour. She's featured more and more. She then sings a song called Arizona Sky, which I love. So good. And a manager approaches her wanting to give her a record contract. Jack does not like this guy, but ultimately Ali signs. Rez is the name of this manager, and he begins to shape her career, and he's trying to turn her in the direction of a pop act. He wants her to dye her hair blonde. She doesn't. They settle on red. He starts to twist the music. He starts to add backup dancers. He's trying to pull her out of country music a little bit. And then as Ali's sort of gaining notoriety, we're seeing her shapeshift change, grow into her stardom. We see Jack fall further and further into addiction and alcoholism. We see him passing out a lot more. We see him missing Ali's performance. And then one night when he misses a performance, he, in his drunken stupor, goes to a friend's house and passes out in his front yard. This is his friend Noodles, who's played by Dave Chappelle. And he kind of wakes him up, and they have like a kind of long discussion about life. And Noodles is a retired musician, and he's talking about, you know, his wife and his kids and his family and how that's where he wants to be now. He doesn't want to be in the music industry anymore. And this is his quote. He says, you know, it's like, I don't know, you float out to sea, and then one day you find a port and you say, I'm going to stay here for a few days. And a few days becomes a few years, and then you forget where you were going in the first place. Then you realize you don't really give a shit about where you were going because you like where you're at. So Ali then shows up to the house to kind of collect Jack, and he does an impromptu proposal with a guitar string ring that he makes, and they get married right there. Ali then is continuing to rise up in her stardom. She performs at SNL, and she's fully made over into her pop image. Her song's called Why Did You Do That? I think this is where Lady Gaga is probably able to heavily draw on her own experience, obviously, as a pop artist. Lady Gaga, as a pop artist, is definitely not as shallow as they make pop music look. In this film, it's very much painted as like country music deep, pop music shallow. I don't know if anybody's heard country music recently. It's fucking garbage. And very, very, very shallow. And a lot of pop music is often written off because of the beat for not being as good as it is. If we look at performers like Lady Gaga or Ariana Grande, we see that there's a lot deeper meaning to a lot of their music, and it is quite good. There's just certain pop a la Meghan Trainor that sucks. Anyway, so they're backstage. Jack absolutely hates what Ali's music has turned into because he thinks it's lost its soul. And this particular direction of pop music that her manager is pushing her into, yes, is shallow pop music. Bobby comes to watch Ali's show backstage, and him and Jack make up. After the show, Ali's kind of having a bath and kind of decompressing, and Jack gets drunk and decides to pick a fight with her because he's angry with her. I think we're seeing some feelings of anger about him being a falling star and her being a rising one, as well as him feeling that she's kind of betraying her talent. And he calls her a sellout, essentially. And I'll do a quick little clip of the dialogue. Ali says, "You know what? I'd like it for my boyfriend to actually love me. Actually, my husband." And Jack says, "Yeah, who's your fucking boyfriend? You got a boyfriend?" Ali said, "Yeah, I've got a boyfriend." Jack says, "That hurts. You calling me your fucking boyfriend." Ali says, "You're my boyfriend if you don't treat me like your wife." And she says, "Why don't you go and have another drink? We can just get fucking drunk until we fucking disappear. Hey, do you got any of those pills in your pocket?" And Jack says, "You're fucking ugly." And Ali says, "I'm what?" And Jack says, "You're fucking ugly." And she says, "Get out, get out." And I think it's one of those fights that you have as a couple that's felt so visceral and so real. I think near the end of a relationship or when you're in a really bad place, depending on what your relationships are like. But I think, for my personal experience, like when you're at the end of a relationship and you've hit that wall where there's just contempt on both sides, and you probably started out as good people, both of you, and you've turned into some people that you don't recognize anymore. You don't recognize yourself in relation to this other person, and you don't recognize that other person. They aren't the person you fell in love with anymore. And you just say things that you would never say and that you don't mean because it's like, and this is, of course, if you like haven't gone to therapy, highly recommend going to therapy before getting in a relationship. But from personal experience, like, this just made me feel like, it just felt so visceral to places I've been in my life where you're just like, you just say you've said horrible shit to the person that you're with. And it's uncalled for no matter what they did to say something like that. But it felt so visceral and real watching it. And it was like, it just made me cry. Like, it just like, fuck, like, how do people who are in love get to a place where they could just say shit to like purposely try to hurt each other, Yeah, it, like, broke my heart. So Jack's career continues to fade. He continues to sort of step out of the limelight as Ali's stepping into it. He's diving further and further into addiction. They then attend the Grammys together because Ali's nominated for Best New Artist. During the performance, it's pretty clear that Jack is extremely drunk. He's not doing well. He's not coping. And then he comes down to sit with Ali. Ali goes up because she ends up winning Best New Artist. Jack is trying to find the bathroom, but he gets confused and stumbles up on stage because he sees Ali. This is, of course, live televised. This is her moment. She's winning a Grammy, and Jack pisses himself on live TV and just completely embarrasses her. Ali's father is obviously livid. We cut to a hotel room where Jack is like passed out. They're trying to wake him up in the shower. Ali's dad is screaming. And her manager makes it pretty clear, like, look, like, Jack is wrecking your image. Jack goes to rehab, and they kind of reveal the root of his addiction and his childhood trauma. It reveals that he tried to hang himself at the age of 12. This is where I think some of the critics criticize the over-explanation of Jack. I don't know. I think that's the kind of shit you talk about in rehab. I don't know. Addiction comes from somewhere, and I think it's easier to humanize somebody when you understand where it comes from. So abuse and suicidal ideation in history is obviously going to be helpful to understanding a character. After rehab, Jack and Bobby have a very nice moment where Jack says, it was never Dad that I looked up to, it was you, which I thought was sweet. Ali then wants to bring Jack with her on tour to Europe, and her manager says, no, there's no way. He's a liability. Like, absolutely not. He cannot come. And so Ali says, okay, well then cancel it because I'm not going without him. Jack overhears this and he's feeling like very guilty. Ali doesn't know that he's heard this. A resident talks to Jack personally, and he says, you're an embarrassment to Ali's career. And when you do relapse, it's going to be damaging to her career. Not if, when. And later, Ali before her last show, Allie lies to Jack and says she's going to cancel the summer tour because she just wants to spend time with him. And we see this moment where it all kind of comes to fruition, the conversation with Allie, the conversation with Rez in Jack's mind. And so tonight will be her last show, and Jack promises that he's going to be there. So Allie leaves to go and do her sound checks and stuff, and Jack says he'll be there. We then see Jack getting everything ready. He's heading into the garage. He takes off his belt, and this is obviously where we realize what's going to happen. So we see him go into the door, and we see the outside of the garage. We see him shut the door, and we know that he's committed suicide. We then cut to Allie, who can't find him at the concert, and send a car for him. Like, where is he? I'm worried. And then we cut to Allie being distraught over his death in the house. She, in anger, has destroyed the frames of the photos that they have in their house, and then obviously has to later clean it up filled with regret. But I think that is just one of the stages of grief, anger. For me, my biggest one is I was stuck in denial. After my friend committed suicide, I spent 3 full days Googling her name. I'm not kidding, over and over again, until my husband had to take my phone away because my brain could not collect that she had died. It couldn't handle it. I literally could not rationalize it. So I kept having to read her obituary over and over and over and over and over again to realize that she had died. I also spent a great deal of time texting her because I couldn't believe she was dead. I could not believe she was dead. I thought, oh, she's going to be so mad when she finds out what everybody has said. She can't be dead. The brain does weird stuff when you're in grief. Bobby then comes over to see her, and he says this line that I think got him his Academy Award nomination. Jack talked about how music is essentially 12 notes between any octave. 12 notes and the octave repeats. It's the same story over and over, forever. Any artist can offer the world is how they see those 12 notes. That's it. He loved how you see them. At his service, she performs I Will Never Love Again, which is a song he wrote, and it flashes to them on tour, and there's a little clip of him singing it. And that is A Star Is Born. So it's a quick little episode today for you guys. I'll be back again next week. My shows will be done. I'm going to have more time. Next week is a 1994 version of Little Women. So another remake, because I am full of shit. I hope everybody has a really good long weekend.